The rain had started as a drizzle that Sunday morning, but by the time Daniel pulled into the church parking lot, it was coming down in sheets. He sat in his car for a moment, watching the windshield wipers sweep back and forth, creating a rhythmic backdrop to his swirling thoughts. 3 months. 3 months of late nights, distant conversations, and excuses that never quite added up. Sarah had been different lately. The woman who used to greet him with enthusiasm when he came home from work now barely looked up from her phone. Date nights were canceled. Weekend plans dissolved into her sudden commitments with friends he'd never met. And church. She'd suddenly become devoted to Sunday services, attending without fail every single week. Daniel had never been particularly religious, but Sarah's newfound dedication had seemed genuine at first. She talked about finding peace, about needing spiritual guidance. He'd supported it, even encouraged it. A marriage was about giving each other space to grow, wasn't it? But something felt wrong. The way she clutched her phone when it buzzed. The way she angled the screen away from him. The perfume she started wearing. Different from the one he'd bought her for their anniversary. His best friend Marcus had been the one to plant the seed of doubt. "Man, I'm not trying to start anything," Marcus had said over beers 2 weeks ago. "But have you ever actually seen her go into that church? Like, driven there yourself?" Daniel had laughed it off then. But the question had burrowed into his mind like a splinter, working its way deeper with each passing day. This morning, Sarah had left early as usual. "Service starts at 9, she'd said, kissing his cheek in that perfunctory way that had replaced their real kisses. "I'll be home by noon." Daniel had nodded, waited 15 minutes after she left, and then made his decision. Now he was here, parked 3 rows back from the entrance, watching people file into the church with umbrellas and Bibles. The service would be starting in 10 minutes. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over her contact. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it over the rain. What if he was wrong? What if she really was in there, and he was about to look like a paranoid fool? But what if he was right? He pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. He could see the church doors clearly from where he sat. No one was answering their phone, walking out to take a call. 4 rings. 5. "Hey, babe," Sarah's voice came through, slightly breathless. There was noise in the background, voices, maybe music. Could have been the church. "What's up?" Daniel's mouth felt dry. "Hey, nothing, just missing you. How's the service?" "Oh, it's good. Really moving today. The pastor is talking about forgiveness." Her voice had that tight quality it got when she was nervous. "I should probably go, though. It's kind of rude to be on the phone." "Yeah, of course," Daniel said, his eyes fixed on the church entrance. No one had come out. "Which entrance did you go in? Front or side?" There was a pause, just a fraction of a second too long. "Front." "Why?" Daniel's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "No reason. Hey, actually, I'm glad I caught you. I'm outside the church right now. I'm outside. Thought I'd surprise you. Maybe we could grab lunch after." The silence on the line was deafening. He could hear it, the sharp intake of breath, the sudden absence of background noise, as if she'd moved away from wherever she actually was. And then, muffled but unmistakable, he heard her whisper to someone, "Oh my God, he's..." The line didn't go dead, but it might as well have. In that moment of silence, stretching between them like a chasm, Daniel heard the truth louder than any confession could have delivered it. His wife wasn't at church. His wife hadn't been at church for months. And his wife wasn't alone. "Daniel, she started, her voice cracking. He hung up. His hands were shaking. The rain continued to fall. Daniel sat in his car for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The phone in his hand buzzed incessantly. Sarah calling back, over and over. He watched the screen light up with her name, her photo smiling at him from their vacation in Maui 2 years ago. She looked happy in that picture. They'd both been happy then. Or had they? Had he missed the signs even back then? Finally, he answered. Before she could speak, he said, "Don't lie to me anymore. Just don't. Where are you?" The sob that came through the phone sounded genuine, but Daniel found he didn't care. I'm I'm at a friend's apartment. Daniel, please, I can explain. Which friend? His voice was eerily calm, even to his own ears. Another pause. You don't know him. Him. There it was. The confirmation that shattered whatever microscopic hope had remained. Daniel let out a laugh that sounded foreign. Bitter. How long? Daniel. How long? Each word was a stone dropped into still water. For months, she whispered. But it's not. It doesn't mean. He hung up again. For months. For months of lies, of her crawling into bed next to him after being with someone else. For months of him making dinner, asking about her day, trying to figure out why she seemed so distant while she was building an entirely separate life. The Sunday church story wasn't even her only alibi, he realized now. The late work meetings, the girls' nights out, the yoga classes that seemed to run impossibly long. Daniel started the car and drove. Not home. He couldn't face that house right now. Their house, filled with photographs of a marriage that had apparently been dying while he'd been too blind to see it. Instead, he drove to Marcus's apartment across town. His friend took one look at his face and stepped aside to let him in. Brother, what happened? The story came out in fragments. Marcus listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. When Daniel finished, Marcus just pulled him into a hug. The kind of hug that said more than words could. I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry. Over the next 3 days, Daniel stayed at Marcus's place. Sarah's calls and texts became increasingly desperate. She showed up at Marcus's apartment on the second day, but Marcus sent her away before Daniel even knew she was there. You need time to think, Marcus told him. Don't let her guilt you into a decision before you're ready. On the fourth day, Daniel finally went home. Sarah was there, looking like she hadn't slept. The house felt different now, tainted. He could see her infidelity in every corner. The couch where she'd probably texted him. The kitchen where she'd fabricated her alibis. Their bedroom where she'd returned to him after being with someone else. We need to talk, she said, her eyes red and swollen. There's nothing to talk about, Daniel replied, heading to the bedroom. He pulled out a suitcase and started packing. Please, Daniel, please just listen. It was a mistake. I was confused and lonely and... He spun around. Lonely? You were lonely? I was here, Sarah. Every single day I was here. I was your husband, and I was right here. You were here, but you weren't present. She shot back, some fire returning to her voice. You were always at work, always tired, always too busy to really see me. So that made it okay? His voice rose. That made it okay to cheat on me? To lie to my face every single day? You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were unhappy. We could have gone to counseling, worked on it, anything but this. Sarah crumpled, sitting on the edge of the bed they'd shared for 5 years. I know, and I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I'll never see him again. We can start over, go to therapy, whatever you want. Please don't leave me. Daniel zipped up his suitcase. The sound was final, decisive. You already left me, Sarah. 4 months ago when you made your choice. I'm just making mine now. He walked out of the bedroom, past the wedding photos on the wall, past the life they'd built. At the door, he turned back. She was standing in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. The worst part, he said quietly, is that you made me doubt myself. You made me feel crazy for suspecting, made me feel guilty for not trusting you. But I should have trusted my gut. I should have trusted what I was seeing. That's on me, and I'll never make that mistake again. The door closed behind him with a soft click. In his car, Daniel sat for a moment before starting the engine. His phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. I love you. Please. He deleted it without responding and drove away from the house, from the marriage, from the woman who'd been a stranger wearing his wife's face. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least it was honest. The divorce proceedings began within the week. Daniel hired a lawyer, a stern woman named Patricia Chan who'd handled Marcus's cousin's messy separation. She sat across from him in her downtown office, listening to his story without judgment, taking notes in a leather-bound folder. You want this done quickly, I assume? Patricia asked, looking at him over her reading glasses. As quickly as possible, Daniel confirmed. We don't have kids, thank God. The house is in both our names, but I honestly don't care about it. She can have it. I just want out. Patricia frowned. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're hurt, but don't make decisions based on emotion that will affect you financially for years to come. That house represents equity, investment. Then sell it and split the proceeds, Daniel interrupted. I don't want to fight over furniture and photograph albums. I don't want this to drag on for months with both of us hiring forensic accountants and battling over who gets the coffee maker. Clean break. That's what I need. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll draw up the papers. Sarah contested nothing. She signed everything her lawyer put in front of her, agreed to every term. Through their attorneys, she sent messages saying she understood, that she wouldn't fight him, that she just wanted him to be happy. The lack of resistance somehow made it worse. It confirmed what Daniel had already known. She'd checked out of their marriage long before he'd made that phone call outside the church. The waiting period in their state was 60 days. 60 days of living in Marcus's guest room, of packing up 7 years of a relationship into cardboard boxes, of dividing a shared life into his and hers. Friends reached out, having heard through the grapevine. Some sided with Daniel immediately. Others, surprisingly, suggested he was being too hasty, that everyone makes mistakes, that marriages require forgiveness. She didn't make a mistake, Daniel told his friend Josh over coffee one afternoon. Sleeping with someone else for 4 months wasn't an error in judgment. It was a choice she made every single day. During those 60 days, Daniel learned things about himself he hadn't known. He learned that he actually enjoyed cooking when he wasn't doing it out of obligation. He started running again, something he'd given up years ago because Sarah had complained about him being gone too much. He reconnected with old friends he'd lost touch with, realized how much of himself he'd compressed to fit into a marriage that was slowly suffocating him. Marcus's apartment became a sanctuary. In the evenings, they'd sit on the balcony with beers, watching the city lights come on, talking about everything and nothing. Marcus never said, "I told you so," though he probably had every right to. Instead, he just provided steady friendship, the kind that doesn't require performance or pretense. One night, about 40 days into the waiting period, Sarah showed up at the apartment building. She buzzed from downstairs, her voice crackling through the intercom. "Daniel, please. I just need 5 minutes. Please." Marcus raised an eyebrow at him. Daniel sighed and buzzed her up. She looked terrible. Weight loss, dark circles under her eyes, hair that needed washing. Part of him, a small, traitorous part, wanted to feel sympathy. But he remembered the silence on that phone call, the muffled whispering, and his heart remained steady. "I ended it," she said, standing in the doorway. Marcus had retreated to his bedroom, giving them privacy Daniel wasn't sure he wanted. "The day you left, I ended it. I told him it was over." "Okay," Daniel said neutrally. "I've been in therapy, trying to figure out why I did what I did. My therapist says I have attachment issues stemming from my parents' divorce, that I self-sabotage when things get too comfortable, that—" "Sarah, stop." Daniel held up a hand. "I'm glad you're getting help. I really am. But it doesn't change anything." Her face crumpled. "Don't you want to know why? Don't you want to understand what happened?" "I know what happened," Daniel said quietly. "You were unhappy in our marriage, and instead of talking to me about it, you went looking for happiness somewhere else. Maybe there are complicated psychological reasons for that. Maybe your childhood played a role. But at the end of the day, you're an adult who made a choice. And I'm an adult making mine. You don't love me anymore." It wasn't a question. Daniel thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know if I stopped loving you or if I just stopped loving who you became. Or maybe who you always were, and I just didn't see it. But it doesn't matter now. Love isn't enough. It never was." She left quietly, and Daniel felt something release in his chest. It wasn't quite closure. He'd learned that closure was a myth, something people told themselves to feel better about endings. But it was acceptance. The marriage was over. Had been over really long before he'd sat in that church parking lot. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Daniel sat in Patricia Chen's office, signing his name on the final documents, officially dissolving a marriage that had already been dead. No ceremony, no witnesses beyond the lawyers. It seemed anticlimactic for something that had meant so much, had been such a fundamental part of his identity for 7 years. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked as he stood to leave. Daniel considered the question. "Lighter," he finally said, and he meant it. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel finally felt like himself again. He'd moved into his own apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a building with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in floods of natural light. It was nothing like the house he'd shared with Sarah. With its dark wood floors and heavy curtains, this place felt clean, unencumbered, like a fresh start made physical. Work had become more than just a paycheck. He'd thrown himself into a project at the architecture firm where he worked, designing a community center for a nonprofit organization. The project was pro bono, which meant long hours for no extra pay, but Daniel found satisfaction in creating something meaningful. His boss, Linda, had noticed his renewed energy. "Whatever you're doing," she told him during a review, "keep doing it. Your work has been exceptional lately." What he was doing was simply being present. Without the constant anxiety of trying to understand Sarah's distance, without the mental gymnastics of explaining away red flags, he could focus. He'd forgotten what that felt like, being fully engaged in the moment rather than always bracing for the next shoe to drop. He'd also started dating again, though casually. A few coffee meetings, one dinner that went nowhere, a second date with a woman named Rachel from the gym who was nice but ultimately too similar to Sarah for his comfort. He wasn't in a hurry. For the first time in his adult life, he was content being alone, and he wouldn't settle for anything less than someone who enhanced that contentment rather than disrupted it. Then he met Emma. It happened at a bookstore of all places. Daniel had developed a routine of spending Saturday mornings at the independent bookshop downtown, browsing the architecture and design section with a coffee in hand. Emma had reached for the same book he'd been eyeing, a photography collection of modernist buildings. "Sorry," they'd both said simultaneously, then laughed. She had an easy smile, brown eyes that crinkled at the corners, and an unself-conscious way of tucking her dark hair behind her ear. They'd started talking about the book, then about architecture in general, and before Daniel quite knew how it happened, they'd been talking for an hour. "I teach art history at the university," Emma explained. "I'm always looking for good visual references for my lectures on modernism." "I'm an architect," Daniel said. "Or I design buildings and hope someone will eventually let me see them constructed." She'd laughed at that. The eternal optimist. They'd exchanged numbers, and Daniel had walked out of the bookstore feeling something he hadn't felt in over a year. Genuine excitement about getting to know someone. Not the desperate, anxious need to fill a void, but real curiosity and interest. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant Emma knew. The conversation flowed effortlessly. She told him about her work, her passion for teaching, her ongoing research into female architects who'd been overlooked by history. He told her about his community center project, his love of urban design, his dream of someday creating buildings that served communities rather than just corporate interests. "You're passionate about your work," Emma observed. "I like that. What about you?" Daniel asked. "What made you want to teach?" Emma's expression grew thoughtful. "I had a professor in college who made art feel alive, like it mattered beyond just being pretty pictures in museums. She taught me that understanding visual culture helps us understand ourselves. I wanted to pass that on." They talked about books, travel, childhood memories. Emma had grown up in Portland, the daughter of a nurse and a high school counselor. She'd been married briefly in her late 20s. "We were too young and wanted different things," she explained without bitterness, and had been single for 3 years before meeting Daniel. "I'm not interested in playing games," she said directly over dessert. "I'm 41. I know what I want, and I don't have patience for ambiguity. If that's too intense for a first date, I understand." Daniel found himself smiling. "That's the least intense thing I've heard in years. I appreciate the honesty." Over the next 3 months, they fell into an easy relationship. Emma never pushed for more than Daniel was ready to give, and he found himself naturally wanting to spend more time with her. She met Marcus, who gave his approval with a subtle nod. Daniel met Emma's close friends, a tight-knit group of professors and artists who welcomed him without the suspicious interrogation he'd anticipated. What struck Daniel most was how uncomplicated it was. When Emma said she'd be somewhere, she was there. When she talked about her day, he believed her. There were no hidden phone screens, no mysterious absences, no gut-churning feeling that something was off. The relationship was built on a foundation of honesty that Sarah had undermined from the start. One evening, lying on Emma's couch after dinner, she turned to him. "Can I ask you something about your ex-wife?" Daniel tensed slightly but nodded. "Sure. Do you still love her?" He considered the question carefully. "No, I don't think I do. I'm angry sometimes about what she did, about the time I lost. But love? That died the moment I heard her whisper to him on the phone." Emma nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good. Because I'm falling for you, Daniel Morrison, and I need to know you're actually available." His heart did something complicated in his chest. "I'm falling for you too," he admitted. "And I'm more available than I've been in years. Maybe ever." She kissed him then, and Daniel felt something he'd thought was lost forever. The possibility of a future built on truth. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening, 9 months after the divorce. Daniel was at a restaurant with Emma, celebrating her securing a grant for her research. They were laughing over wine, Emma's hand resting on his across the table, when he saw her. Sarah. She was standing near the entrance with a friend, waiting to be seated. She hadn't seen him yet, and for a moment, Daniel considered the possibility of slipping out unnoticed. But then Emma followed his gaze and understood immediately. "Is that her?" Emma asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. Do you want to leave?" Before he could answer, Sarah's eyes found his. He watched the progression of emotions cross her face. Surprise, pain, and then something that looked like devastation when she saw Emma, saw their clasped hands, saw the easy intimacy between them. Sarah said something to her friend and started walking toward their table. Daniel's grip on Emma's hand tightened instinctively, but Emma just squeezed back reassuringly. "Daniel," Sarah said when she reached them. She looked better than she had the last time he'd seen her. Hair styled, makeup applied, weight restored. But there was a brittleness to her, like glass that had been cracked and glued back together. "Hi, Sarah." He kept his voice neutral. She looked at Emma, then back at Daniel. "I don't want to interrupt. I saw you and I couldn't not say hello." An awkward silence stretched between them. Emma, reading the situation perfectly, said, "I'm going to run to the restroom. Give you two a moment." She kissed Daniel's cheek before leaving, a gesture that was both supportive and proprietary. Sarah watched her go, something unreadable in her expression. "She seems nice." "She is. Are you happy?" The question came out raw, almost desperate. Daniel looked at his ex-wife, really looked at her. He could see the regret etched in the lines around her eyes, the way she held herself like someone bracing for a blow. A year ago, seeing her like this might have given him satisfaction. But now he just felt tired. "Yeah," he said honestly. "I am. Are you?" Sarah let out a laugh that was more sob than humor. No, I'm not. I haven't been, not since you left." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "He was nothing, Daniel. The guy I was with. It meant nothing, and the moment it was over, I realized what I destroyed. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away for something that wasn't even real." "Sarah," Daniel started, but she held up a hand. "I'm not trying to get you back. I can see I've lost that chance. But I need you to know that I understand what I did. I've been in therapy for months, really working on myself. I understand now that I was running from intimacy, that when things got real and comfortable, I sabotaged them because some broken part of me didn't believe I deserved happiness." Daniel felt a pang of something, not sympathy, exactly, but perhaps understanding. "I'm glad you're working on that. I really am. But it doesn't change what happened." "I know." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, and she made no move to wipe them away. "I see you with her, And you look the way you used to look at me, before I ruined everything. And I realized that could have still been us. We could have been sitting here celebrating something, holding hands, making plans, but I destroyed it. I destroyed us. We destroyed it, Daniel corrected gently. Both of us. I wasn't perfect either, Sarah. I was checked out in my own ways, probably ignored signs that you were unhappy. But the difference is, when there was a problem, I stayed to try to fix it. You didn't give me that chance. Sarah wiped at her face, mascara smudging under her eyes. Would it have made a difference? If I'd come to you before him? If I'd said I was unhappy, that I needed more? Would you have fought for us? Daniel thought about it honestly. I would have tried. Whether it would have worked, I don't know. Maybe we weren't right for each other, and we would have figured that out eventually anyway. But we'll never know now because you made a unilateral decision for both of us. Emma was walking back from the restroom. Sarah saw her and straightened her shoulders. I should go. My friend is waiting. She looked at Daniel one last time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for not being brave enough to face our problems honestly. You deserved better than that. Yeah, Daniel said. I did. Sarah walked away, and Emma slid back into her seat. You okay? Daniel exhaled slowly. Yeah, I am actually. What did she say? That she's sorry. That she understands what she lost. He picked up his wine glass, studied the deep red color. And I believe her. But it doesn't change anything. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. You can understand why you broke them. You can be sorry about it. But that doesn't make them whole again. Emma reached for his hand again. Sounds like you've thought about this a lot. I have. Probably too much. He smiled at her. But I'm done with it now. Sarah made her choices and I've made mine. I choose this, you, us, whatever we're building together. I choose honesty and presence and something real. Even if real means sometimes boring and ordinary? Emma asked with a slight smile. Especially then, Daniel said. I've had enough drama to last a lifetime. Give me boring and ordinary with someone I trust over exciting and uncertain with someone I can't. They finished their dinner, the encounter with Sarah becoming just another moment in the evening rather than the defining one. As they walked to the car, Emma's hand in his, Daniel thought about the man he'd been a year ago, sitting in a church parking lot in the rain, about to discover a truth that would shatter his world. That man had been scared, hurt, betrayed. But he'd also been brave enough to face the truth when it appeared, to walk away from something comfortable but broken, to believe he deserved better. Daniel felt gratitude toward his past self for that courage, for choosing the hard path that led to this moment. What are you thinking about? Emma asked, noticing his silence. Just that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Daniel said. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he meant it completely. Weeks later, Daniel heard through mutual friends that Sarah had moved to another city. A fresh start, they said. She'd gotten a new job, was seeing someone new. He felt nothing at the news beyond a vague wish that she'd find whatever she was looking for. As for Daniel, he continued building his life, brick by honest brick. The community center he'd designed broke ground that spring, and Emma was there for the ceremony, taking photos for her own project about public architecture. Marcus became a regular fixture at their dinners, often bringing dates of his own. The life Daniel created wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when trust felt fragile. But it was real, built on a foundation of truth rather than lies. And that, he'd learned, made all the difference. The church where he'd sat in his car that rainy Sunday morning became just another building he passed occasionally. Sometimes he'd remember that moment, the silence on the phone line, the muffled whisper, the way his world had tilted on its axis. But the memory no longer came with pain. Instead, it carried gratitude. Because sometimes the truth, no matter how devastating, is the kindest thing that can happen to you. It sets you free to find what you actually deserve. And what Daniel had found was worth every difficult moment that came before. He'd learned that marriage isn't just about love. It's about integrity, honesty, and choosing your partner every single day. He'd learned that his instincts were worth trusting, that when something feels wrong, it usually is. Most importantly, he'd learned that his happiness wasn't dependent on someone else's choices, that he could rebuild himself into someone stronger, wiser, and more whole. The silence on that phone line had told him the truth. But the life he'd built afterward told him something even more important. He was going to be just fine. Better than fine. He was going to be happy. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.